In the heart of South Central Los Angeles, where the echo of gunshots once ruled the dark, humid nights, a man named Marcus Reed lived as a huge legend. He was feared by his powerful enemies, and he was worshipped like a king by his followers. Marcus Reed was a street boss known for his powerful, cold ruthlessness. But one single, terrible night changed everything. That night, the powerful leader would meet the God he mocked, and the city that once trembled before his black SUV would one day gather to hear his gentle, powerful sermons. This is the epic story of redemption, how a dangerous gang leader found his way to become a passionate, hopeful preacher. Marcus Reed grew up on 115th Street, a place where the sun shone bright but the shadows were long and dangerous. For Marcus, survival wasn't a choice. It was an instinct, like breathing. His life was marked by loss early on. His father completely disappeared when Marcus was only 5 years old, leaving a huge silent hole in their small apartment. His mother, Evelyn, was a hero who worked double shifts at a loud, greasy diner just to keep the lights on and food on the table. She was always tired, always worried, and always praying for her son. By the time he was 16, Marcus felt like he had already lived a full, hard life. School felt slow and useless compared to the fast, dangerous life on the street. He dropped out and joined the Iron Dogs, a street gang famous for their territory and their violence. Marcus was a natural leader, and his rise was fast, too fast. He was smart, fiercely loyal to his friends, and he never showed fear. The streets recognized his power immediately. Within 3 quick years, by the age of 19, Marcus wasn't just a gang member. He was the head, the boss, the man in charge. They gave him a title that everyone whispered, Reed the King. He moved through the neighborhood like royalty, but instead of wearing a crown, he wore thick gold chains and drove huge, black, intimidating SUVs. The entire neighborhood bowed or ducked their heads in fear when he passed by. His word was law, but behind the expensive cars and the heavy gold chains, Marcus was empty. The life of the gang was loud, but his heart was silent and hollow. Violence had become his only language, and death was the only punctuation mark he knew. The full stop at the end of every argument. He was trapped in a palace of his own making, a king with nothing left to rule but his fear. He often looked at his mother, Evelyn, who was still tired and praying, and felt a huge, crushing shame. But shame was a feeling he learned to bury deep inside, under layers of gold and rage. The silence inside Marcus cracked one hot summer night in 2008. The night felt heavy, full of bad air and even worse intentions. A rival gang, called the Blue Saints, drove through the Iron Dogs' territory and killed one of Marcus's young men, Little Joe. Marcus felt a searing, hot rage. He wasn't just angry, he was blinded by the need for revenge. He gathered his men. His words were fire. They found the Blue Saints near a small, brightly lit convenience store, a place where people usually bought sodas and chips, not death. The ambush was chaotic and deafening. Gunfire tore through the street like fireworks, shattering the silence, the store window, and everything else in its path. When the awful noise stopped and the thick gray smoke began to clear, Marcus felt a strange, cold calm. He looked at the chaos, the abandoned cars and the fallen rivals. But then he saw him. Lying on the dirty pavement, near a discarded toy and a bag of candy, was a young boy. He was only 10 years old. He wasn't a gang member. He was an innocent kid who had just been in the wrong place at the completely wrong time. The boy lay still and dead. Marcus froze. He hadn't personally pulled the trigger. One of his younger men had. But it didn't matter. It was his revenge, his war, his fault. The terrible image of the boy's innocent, still face was a blow that finally broke through the hard armor Marcus had worn for years. The news quickly plastered his face, his gold chains, and his gang symbol all over the TV screens. Gang violence claims another child. Marcus went into hiding immediately, but the safety of the safe house was useless. The face of that little boy, the innocent victim, wouldn't leave his mind. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. The violence that had been his strength had suddenly become a horrifying weakness. Something inside him cracked that night. He tried to ignore the pain, But the guilt was a huge, crushing weight he couldn't lift. A few long, sleepless months later, the law finally caught up. Marcus was hiding in a rundown apartment building deep in the city. One cold, wet morning, a massive police raid tore through the building. The SWAT team stormed the safe house with huge assault rifles, shouting loud, sharp commands. Everyone expected Reed the King to fight to the death. But Marcus didn't fight. He didn't shout. He didn't even raise his weapon. He just dropped his heavy, cold gun onto the floor. The sound of the metal hitting the wood was surprisingly small and final. Marcus, whispering, his voice thin and defeated, "It's over." He surrendered without a struggle. He was tired of running, tired of fighting, and tired of the endless darkness. The court gave him a long, heavy sentence. 25 years in a cold, unforgiving state prison. Inside the prison walls, Marcus found something he hadn't known since he was a child. Silence. The silence of the cell, the silence of the long hallways, and the cold, heavy silence of his own guilt. The noise of the streets was gone, replaced by the relentless, mocking echo of that little boy's final moments. He spent the first year staring at the concrete walls, his mind still trapped on 115th Street. Then Marcus met an older man who was nothing like the others. His name was Jeremiah Cole. Jeremiah was serving time for armed robbery, a terrible mistake he made years ago. But Jeremiah wasn't bitter. He carried a small, worn Bible, not a blade or a weapon. He had a deep, calming voice and a quiet strength that made the biggest, meanest inmates respect him. Marcus learned that Jeremiah used to be a respected preacher before he fell from grace, made a huge mistake that ruined his life. Every single night, Jeremiah would sit on his bunk and gently read verses aloud. Marcus, the gang boss, mocked him at first. "Marcus," his voice sharp and mean, "that book didn't save you, old man. You're right here with the rest of us." But Jeremiah would just smile, a calm, peaceful smile that Marcus couldn't stand. "Jeremiah, it's not about saving me from this place, Marcus. I put myself here. It's about transforming me while I am here." Those simple, quiet words didn't make Marcus angry. They made him think. They were a tiny seed of hope planted deep into the cracked, barren ground of his heart. Marcus ignored Jeremiah for weeks, but the guilt was a sickness he couldn't cure. Then, one terrifying night, the silence of the prison was broken by a vivid, emotional dream. He was back at the convenience store, the same smoke, the same abandoned cars, the same awful silence. He was standing over the body of the little boy. Suddenly, the boy's eyes opened. The boy slowly, quietly stood up. He wasn't scary or angry. He was sad. The boy looked Marcus straight in the eye and said the most powerful, gentle words Marcus had ever heard. "The boy, you can still make this right." Marcus woke up instantly. His heart was slamming against his ribs, and his face was soaked with tears, something he hadn't done since his father disappeared 20 years ago. The raw, heavy emotion was completely new, and it washed away the anger and the pride. The next day, Marcus was different. His usual cold mask was gone. He walked straight up to Jeremiah, who was reading his Bible. Marcus, his voice rough from crying, "Jeremiah, I need to know what to do. The streets don't have the answers anymore." Jeremiah didn't ask questions. He didn't judge. He just closed his book and waited. "Marcus, that book, the Bible, I mocked it, but I think I need to read it. I need to understand that dream. Will you give me one?" Jeremiah smiled his peaceful smile. He reached under his mattress and pulled out a second, slightly newer Bible he had been saving. Jeremiah handing it to Marcus. "This book is a long journey, Marcus. It's not a magic trick, but it is a map. That dream, that was the beginning of your second life." That simple exchange, the exchange of a gun for a book, was the moment the transformation truly began. Marcus started his second life inside his tiny cell. He struggled with the Bible. The words about love and forgiveness felt foreign and strange to a man whose mind was trained for hate and violence. Jeremiah patiently guided him. He taught Marcus that forgiveness wasn't a feeling, it was a powerful choice. Marcus had to choose to forgive himself for the little boy's death. Slowly, Marcus found his voice again. It wasn't the roaring voice of Reed the King. It was a calm, powerful voice of a man who had faced his own darkness. Marcus began leading small Bible studies in the prison yard. At first, only a few scared, quiet men showed up, but word spread fast. Men who had once killed without remorse, men who were hardened and cold, came to listen to Marcus. He didn't preach about things he had only read. He preached about things he had lived. He talked about the empty feeling behind the gold chains. He preached about forgiveness, about starting over, and about a God who didn't care where you came from, only where you were going. The impact was huge. Fights went down. Men started talking about their families instead of their rivals. Marcus's Bible study, which he named Street to Sanctuary, became the quiet, secret heart of the prison. Even the hardened prison warden, a man who had seen everything, noticed the massive change in the atmosphere. The warden saw that Marcus wasn't just following rules, he was changing hearts. The change in Marcus was so profound that it was noticed by the people who had the power to help him. In 2018, after serving exactly 10 years of his 25-year sentence, Marcus was granted an early release for his extraordinary good behavior and his work in turning the lives of other inmates around. Walking out of the prison gates was the hardest thing Marcus had ever done. The sunlight was too bright, the sounds were too loud, and the guilt was still heavy. He was physically free, but his mind was still caged by the memory of the past. He went straight back to his old neighborhood. The streets had changed, new buildings, different gangs. But Marcus had changed more than the streets. He didn't go back to the gang. He went straight to his mother's old small church, New Dawn Chapel. The church was run by Pastor Lionel, a kind, older man with a laugh as warm as the summer sun. Pastor Lionel knew Marcus's past, but he saw the new light in his eyes. Pastor Lionel, hugging Marcus tightly. "Welcome home, son. The walls of a prison can't hold the spirit. You served your time for the law. Now you serve your time for the Lord." Marcus trained under Pastor Lionel, studied theology, the study of God and religion, and officially restarted his outreach program, Street to Sanctuary, but this time in the real world. Marcus started visiting prisons again, but now as a free man, a powerful messenger. He would talk to the young inmates, looking them straight in the eye, seeing the same fear and rage he once had. Marcus, his voice now carrying the weight of the streets and the hope of faith. "I know what it's like to live in the dark. I know what that anger feels like, but I also know who turned on the light. You can rewrite your story starting right now." The inmates didn't see a preacher in a fancy suit. They saw Reed the King, a legend who proved that even the darkest heart could find hope. One cold, emotional night, Marcus was finishing a powerful sermon at the New Dawn Chapel. He was tired but fulfilled. As he was packing up his Bible, a shadow fell over him. He looked up, and his heart gave a sudden, painful lurch. Standing in the back of the empty church was Darius, his former right-hand man from the Iron Dogs. Darius was still hard, still wearing the gold chain, and his eyes were full of anger and disappointment. Darius, his voice low, filled with anger. "They told me you were preaching. I didn't believe it. You turned your back on us, Marcus, on everything we built. You're a fake." Darius felt betrayed. Marcus had been their powerful symbol, and now he was talking about peace. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't even get angry. He spoke softly, standing his ground. "Marcus," his voice gentle but strong. "Darius, I didn't turn my back on you. I turned my face towards something greater than a street and a territory. I turned toward the man I should have been all along. That little boy's death cost me everything, but it bought me the truth." Darius just stared. Then without another word, he spun around and left, slamming the church doors behind him. A tense week passed. Marcus prayed constantly, not for himself, but for his old friend. Then the following Sunday night, Darius showed up again. This time, he didn't stand in the back. He walked all the way to the front altar. He wasn't wearing his gold chain. His tough face was wet with tears. Darius, his voice shaking. "Marcus, I tried to hate you all week. I tried to go back to the old life. But the streets are still empty. I can't stop thinking about what you said. I want what you found. I want that light." Marcus put his hand on his old friend's shoulder. That night, right there in the small church, Marcus led Darius through a heartfelt prayer. It was a beautiful, powerful moment. Marcus then baptized Darius in the church's simple baptism pool. The conversion of the right-hand man was the final signal to the streets that the power of Reed the King had truly vanished, replaced by the peace of the preacher. The story of Marcus Reed, the legendary gang leader who became a devoted preacher and transformed his own right-hand man, was too powerful to stay quiet. A local news channel did a short segment on his work, and it quickly went viral. Major news channels called it the Miracle on 115th Street. Churches from all across the country invited him to speak. People wanted to hear the raw, honest truth about what it was like to go from being a killer to being a man of God. Marcus's honesty touched millions, but Marcus never forgot where his journey truly began, the memory of the little boy. Marcus decided to dedicate his life's work to that child. He used the money he earned from speaking engagements and book deals to build a beautiful, huge youth center for at-risk teens, kids who were walking the same dangerous path he once walked. He named the center the Lighthouse. The center provided tutoring, job training, music programs, and, most importantly, a safe haven from the danger and the emptiness of the streets. On the dedication plaque, Marcus had a simple message engraved: dedicated to the hope found in the innocence we failed to protect. He didn't use the boy's name, wanting to protect his privacy, but everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly who Marcus was talking about. The death that had broken him became the foundation for saving hundreds of other kids. Every single Sunday, the New Dawn Chapel was packed. People came not just from the neighborhood, but from everywhere, just to hear Marcus speak. He stood behind the wooden pulpit, the same place Pastor Lionel had stood for years. When Marcus spoke, his words were different from other preachers. They didn't just come from a book. They carried the huge weight of the streets and the deep, profound peace of grace. He spoke about the terror of being chased and the overwhelming joy of being finally free. He would often talk about the little boy, the prison cell, and the choice he made that morning after the dream. Marcus, his voice ringing with conviction. Redemption is not about forgetting the past. That's impossible. Redemption is about taking your broken, terrible story and allowing grace to rewrite it into something that saves others. Marcus Reed, the man who was once Reed the King, finally found the peace that the gold chains and the black SUVs could never provide. He no longer ran from his past. He used it to light the way for others. He never finished high school, but he became one of the wisest, most respected teachers in the entire city. His final, most famous words, which he would say at the end of every sermon, became a powerful anthem of hope for his community. If God can rewrite my story, if he can take a king who ruled with fear and turn him into a servant who leads with love, then I promise you, he can rewrite yours too. Marcus Reed's journey reminds us all that redemption isn't about running away from the darkness. It's about allowing the light to transform the dark into a path for others to follow. From gang leader to gospel preacher, he didn't just find God, he found himself.